Now, I've talked a lot about the question types, and I've talked about what they are testing, what information they need, and where to find that information in the conversation or the lecture. But there's something else which is helpful for identifying what question type you're looking at, and that is the wording of the question. When you see specific wording in a question, you can figure out reliably what kind of question you're being asked, and that's going to help you find the information for that question in your notes. If it's a just purpose or content question, you should be able to find that for a lecture in the start, or for a conversation in the start or in part 2. So just purpose questions typically use the word why and a verb. Why does the student go to the library? That's the reason why the conversation is happening. Just content questions always use the word what, and very often an adverb. What does the professor mainly talk about? What does the professor mostly talk about? Sometimes, as I mentioned, you can get this for a conversation. What is the conversation mainly about? Detailed questions can start in a couple of ways. Very often they start with according to. According to is great. As soon as you see according to, you know it's only a detailed question. No other question will start like that. According to the professor, and then you get some information. Or you might just get the word what. What problem does the student have? If you get according to, it's going to be according to the professor or according to the student or according to the staff member, the librarian, the cashier, or someone else. So for detailed questions, look for according to or what plus a noun or an adjective. Inference questions are very easy to identify because they typically start with what, and they nearly always use words in like infer or imply. So what can be inferred from the student's request? Or what does the lecturer imply when he says this? Function questions always use the word why, and they always ask about the function or the purpose, the rhetorical purpose of something which has been said either by the professor or the staff member or the student. Very often we get these for the lecture. We get them much less commonly for the conversation. So for example, why does the professor say this? Why does the student ask this? You may get a slightly different one. What does the professor mean when he says this? Or what does the professor mean when she says this? Organization questions typically use the word how and then a verb. How does the professor organize the lecture? How does the professor introduce the lecture? Organize and introduce are the most common verbs here. Connecting content questions typically use the words how and then verbs explain or example. As I said previously, these are questions asking about examples or explanations or illustrations that the professor has given. So look for those words how, explain, or example. How does the professor explain his theory about the war's cause? And it's going to be something like by giving the example of something, or by giving the illustration of something, or by comparing it to something. Attitude questions are pretty easy to spot. They will typically use the words what at the start and then opinion of or attitude towards, opinion or attitude. Very easy to spot. And as I mentioned previously, if you hear an opinion expressed in a listening task, as I mentioned, most commonly in the lecture, write it down, because the reason why you're hearing it is 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a question about it. So what is the professor's opinion of cars? What is the professor's attitude towards cars?